Today we are talking 5 of my favorite blush placements. So we have the apple, the sculpted cheekbone, the double dip, the watercolor, and the Insta filter. So I like to switch up my blush placement to change the vibe of a makeup look, but we'll also discuss which placements are most flattering for different face shapes and facial features. A big thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring a portion of this video. We're going to chat about that later. Let us dive straight into it with the apple of the cheek. This is the most classic blush placement. It's a go-to and a really youthful and lovely way to add color to the face. Most people are familiar with this one, but there are a few tricks. So I think that there is a temptation to smile and then apply blush to the apple of the cheek. Smiling is a great way to identify where your apple of the cheek is, but if I was to go ahead and apply a whole bunch of blush here and then I rest, it drops. And in makeup, we're always trying to keep things really lifted and really lift the face. This is Salt New York Rose, which is a really pretty rosebud shade. So first I'm going to get acquainted with my bone structure, right? So I know I can smile, I can see where the apple of my cheek is, and knowing that it's going to drop, I'm going to accommodate for that a little bit. So where my apple is, I'm going to go a little bit higher and a little bit further out. Just going to blend that in with my fingers. This is a really cute placement if you already have naturally prominent apple of the cheek, and oftentimes I like to use a shimmery blush on the apple of the cheek because it gives a really cute bounce. I love it. With most of my blush placements, I tend to prefer to do a large diffuse application as opposed to anything too detailed, because I find that it just looks more natural, looks more realistic, more believable. Keep those edges really soft. And as with all my blush placements, I like to introduce a little bit sort of to the temple area, a little to the nose, sometimes the tip, sometimes the bridge, depends what I'm feeling like. I'll add a little bit to the tip of my nose here, maybe a touch to the chin. Now, if you are someone who has quite a bit of surface redness, you are naturally quite red around the nose perhaps, or maybe across the jawline, sometimes when you apply blush, it can all start to look a little bit messy, right? And it's because your blush is competing with your surface redness. So a good thing, once you've applied your blush, you can go in and conceal anything. So if I've got a little bit of, say, redness here, or redness on the side of the nose, a little bit of concealer will clean it up and make everything look a little bit more neat and professional, I think. So there you go, that is the apple of the cheek, a classic placement. It suits just about everyone with a little bit of a tweaking. Ta-da! The sculpted cheekbone. So I like to think of this almost as like wrapping around the cheekbone. There's a 45-degree tilt, and we start by applying most of the color on the back of the cheekbone and then wrapping up around the cheekbone. This is Salt New York Coral. I love this formula. It's quite emollient, but not glossy. It's just the perfect amount of creamy and really easy to blend. So we're going to start by observing the cheekbone. I wanted to place it more on the back of the cheekbone on a 45-degree tilt here. So I'm going to start just about here. I always compensate a little bit and place my blush just a touch higher, and that compensates for, as we're blending, we don't want the blush to come too low. So hopefully you can see here that we're really focusing this almost on the outer perimeters of the face. I'm going to blend that out. Really the only thing I'm thinking of as I blend this out is not to take it too low. I do like to keep that placement quite large. I think that it looks a little bit more natural that way. So we can take this a little bit onto the apple of the cheek and a little bit onto the temples, but really focusing it on the cheekbone. So if at any stage you feel like your placement's gone a little bit curvy, it's gone a little bit out of bounds, you can always go back in with your foundation tool of choice and just dull it down where you think you've gone a bit OTT. That sort of acts almost like a little eraser. I'm just going to add a tiny bit more here. Another, actually a nice visual cue that you can think of is if you were to imagine a line directly coming down from the iris, we aim to keep most of the blush on the outer portion of that line, as opposed to kind of bringing it onto the apple of the cheek. That might be helpful for some of you. Also, I'm gonna add just a little bit to the bridge of the nose here, and a little bit to the chin, maybe to the temples. It just makes sense. We don't flush just in one place. A natural flush would kind of occur in various areas of the face, and I just want to introduce that color so that it makes sense. I also really like this placement for those of you who do have that surface redness down the central portions of the face. Because the blush is anchored to the outer perimeter of the face, I find that it doesn't compete as much with any kind of redness that might be existing around the mouth and the nose. Give it a go. Another good tip for this sort of placement, if you really want to get snatched and contoured, you can take a little bit of a concealer or even a powder that has a little bit of coverage and just run this down underneath the cheekbone. It's almost like a bit of reverse contouring. We're highlighting this area here. This will help if you've brought your blush down too far. It will help to sort of erase it and clean it up a little bit, but also it improves the contrast between the blush and the skin, and it gives a little bit more of a angular appearance, which is some people's cup of tea and not so much others. It's totally up to preference. There is no right and wrong. And there we have the sculpted cheekbone. A big thank you to today's sponsor, Skillshare. If you're not familiar, Skillshare is an online learning platform with thousands of classes from cool creatives who are generous enough to share their craft with us. So whether you want to write a screenplay or design stationery or learn hashtag strategies for your Instagram side hustle, Skillshare has a class about it. I was extra productive at work this week, partly due to the insights that I learned in Thomas Frank's Productivity for Creatives. Build a system that brings out your best. This class made a massive impression on me. Like many creatives, I often fall into the thought pattern of like, you can't be inspired on demand. This is my art, people. Thomas really opened my eyes when he said that inspiration is a muscle, and there are techniques and systems that can build those creative muscles. And he lists some techniques that you can implement today, like setting artificial constraints, some daily prompts to help you start big, intimidating projects. And for sure, I am a better creative thanks to Thomas and this class. So if you're also looking to flex your creative muscles, then click the first link in my description box. The first 1,000 people to use this link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so that you can try before you buy. Thank you so much, Skillshare. Back to blush. I'm going to call this placement the double dip, which I'm sure means something entirely different on Urban Dictionary, but we're talking about blush here, people. So for this recipe, you will need 2 blushes. One softer, more neutral, more sheer, and then one brighter, more saturated, more pigmented to pop in the center. I think Charlotte Tilbury really understood this concept when she created Cheek to Chic blushes, which is totally a nipple blush. Missed opportunity. I would like to petition for the change of name, but the idea here is that you're meant to use the softer color around the rim over the larger cheek area, and then the brighter color just popped on the center. And here are some other good examples, I think. You could do a soft peach and then a brighter peach in the center. These are by Hourglass. Love this blush formula. It's epic. The only thing I would say is that it helps if the colors are in the same color family. So these two, for example, one is definitely on the warmer side and one is on the cooler side. That's not to say that you can't mix them, but that would be a different concept. I think today I might go for something a little bit tawny. So this is Tom Ford Inhibition and Ravish. And you can see that they're in the same color family. One is just a softer complement to the other. I'm going to take this one on a larger brush, actually, because I want this to be kind of a soft veil of color. Kind of taking this over the larger cheek area and a little bit into the temples, across the nose, a little on the chin. The double dip, I think, is ideal for those of you who maybe struggle to get your blush perfectly blended, because this sort of acts as a transition shade of sorts. And the blush is just easier to blend when you have 2 colors going on. Also, I think it's a wonderful placement for those of you who have a more sallow skin tone, because the initial application of this softer blush creates an all-over saturation that is helpful if you are feeling a little bit sallow and grey. So I've built up a little bit of colour there. I'm going to take now my deeper tone, and I'm going to take this on a smaller brush because I want a more precise application. I'm going to pop this just in the centre. A little bit on the nose, maybe a little bit on the chin. And then you can always actually go back in with that softer colour and blend. So yes, a very helpful, I think, placement if you are wanting to kind of get a more blended blush application. The double dip. The watercolor. This is more of a freestyle placement. So essentially I just take out a whole bunch of my favorite blushes of the moment, all different tones and finishes, and I start to make art. So I know Lisa Eldridge did a similar video about watercolor blush application. I'm going to link that in the description if you want something a little bit more in depth. But essentially you just play. I like to start with something tawny like Revlon Naughty Nude for a little bit more of a bronzer placement. The watercolor blush placement really appeals to me because I'm very indecisive. So this just gives me an opportunity to use a bunch of my favorite blushes all at once. And especially with an eyeshadow look like this, I think it's really nice to connect your blush and your eyeshadow. So I'm going to take on a little bit more of a pointier brush and just connect the end of my eyeshadow with my blush placement. This can start to read quite 80s, which I like, I'm a fan of. The 80s is back. Have you guys noticed that? 80s is back in every facet, in interiors, in fashion. 80s. And then I think with this eye look, I'd like to do a little pop of something orange on the apple of the cheek here. So you get the idea, you're sort of like layering and mixing and matching. The idea is just to make sure that there's kind of no edges between the different blush shades. We want it to look like a big watercolor painting. And this is, I think, a nice placement again for sallow skin tones because it gives you that all over warmth and glow and color. And it's also just, I think, a really fun makeup look to try. I think so often we focus, on skin or on eyes or on lips. And this is giving the blush an opportunity to steal the show. Another thing that I like to do is add something a little bit shimmery to the ball, the apple of the cheek, so that when you smile, you get a little bounce there. A little bit of that one across the bridge of the nose as well. Bit of Goss Contra Chroma, another nice tawny one that I kind of like for sculpty purposes. A little bit of MAC Fairly Precious. One of my favorite shimmery blushes, just for, again, the apple of the cheek. Oh, too much? Nah. So there is just one iteration of the watercolor. Yours might look different depending on your selection of blushes, but this is a good one for your blush enthusiasts and your 80s enthusiasts. Next we have the Insta filter. That's what I'm going to call it because I discovered this on Instagram. A lot of those very popular Instagram filters impart this kind of horizontal, blushy, bronzy placement. It's quite cute, it's quite youthful, and it's quite popular amongst like TikTok and Gen Z, I gather. For this recipe, you will need both a bronzer and a blush. We're going to work with both in this look. So I'm going to take the Fenty Cream bronzer. This is in the shade Teddy, a little darker than I would typically go, but I want to make sure that you guys can see it. And the idea here is that we're keeping the placement quite horizontal. So typically with bronzer placement on YouTube, we do the big three. That's not what we're going to do today. Today, we're going to keep it high and horizontal. So starting really high on the cheekbone and coming straight across with this bronzer and straight over the bridge of the nose. So this is designed to mimic the actual way the sun would hit the face on the highest planes of the face to give that genuinely sun-kissed look. And then to connect it a little bit, we're just going to dash a little bit up here, but it's not really about the hairline in this look. It's primarily across the bridge of the nose. Make sure all those edges are blended. Maybe I introduce a little touch into the chin, into the neck. And for blush, I'm going to go with Daiquiri Dip, also by Fenty. This is quite a strong red shade. I like mixing the bronzer with a bit of a reddish tone blush because it mimics what would happen naturally if you got kissed by the sun. You probably get a little bit burnt, but this is the sun-safe version. So I'm going to again keep this quite high and horizontal. And again over the bridge of the nose. I'll add a little bit to the temples and the chin as well. This placement is really great for long faces because it helps to break up the face, this horizontal placement, and it gives the illusion of a little bit more width. Sometimes if your placement goes a little bit haywire, you can just go back with a little bit of concealer and knock back any areas where perhaps you don't want as much blush. And also it's nice sometimes to brighten up the under eye area last, just to keep everything looking really fresh. I often do that. The last step of my makeup routine is often brightening the under eye. So that is the Insta filter. This is quite a bronzy, summery, sun-kissed, youthful blush placement. A new one in my collection, and I'm enjoying it. Now I want to hear from you guys. Do you have any other blush placements in your repertoire? Describe it to me. Let's chat in the comments. Also, come say hello to me on Instagram at Karima McKimmie. I would love to chat to you there. I will speak to you very soon. Bye.